Two countries, two philosophies. One country built cars to dominate racetracks and Autobahns at speeds that most roads would never see. The other built cars to survive crashes, ice storms, and economic collapse. One chased perfection, the other chased survival. Today, only one of these philosophies still controls its destiny. The other is being absorbed, sold, and restructured. This is not a story about horsepower or leather interiors. It's a story about what happens when engineering philosophy meets economic reality. It's also about why the companies that prioritize survival over speed are the ones writing checks to acquire the companies that didn't. This video is not about cars. It's about philosophy. It's about how philosophy decides which companies survive economic cycles, regulatory tsunamis, and technological revolutions. Ultimately, the market doesn't care how fast your car goes. It cares whether your business model can bend without breaking. Germany built its automotive identity on a single premise: engineering dominance. The Autobahn became more than infrastructure. It became a testing ground, a proving arena, a place where there were no excuses and no speed limits. If your car couldn't sustain 200 kilometers per hour for hours without faltering, it wasn't ready. This wasn't marketing, this was culture. German manufacturers didn't just build cars, they built statements of technical superiority. Precision was the religion, performance was the proof. This philosophy shaped every decision. Engines were over-engineered because reliability at extreme speeds demanded it. Suspension systems were tuned for high-velocity stability. Braking systems were designed to stop massive kinetic energy repeatedly without fade. Drivers didn't just buy transportation, they bought confidence. They bought the assurance that the machine beneath them had been tested beyond any reasonable limit. But this approach had a cost structure most people never saw. Engineering for extreme performance means engineering for edge cases. It means tighter tolerances, more expensive materials, more complex systems. Every additional layer of performance adds weight to the balance sheet. Research and development budgets swelled. Testing cycles lengthened. Supply chains became specialized. The financial model depended on premium pricing to justify premium engineering. And for decades, customers paid it willingly. The German philosophy became a competitive advantage. Competitors could not replicate the engineering depth without matching the level of investment. It was a self-reinforcing cycle. Performance justified price. The price funded more performance. Sweden approached the problem differently. Sweden had ice. Sweden had darkness. Vast distances separated small towns, and long winters meant that mechanical failure wasn't just an inconvenience, it was life-threatening. Swedish engineers didn't design for the Autobahn. They designed for the moment when your car slides off a rural road at night in sub-zero temperatures, leaving you to survive until help arrives. Safety wasn't just a marketing feature, it was an existential requirement. Swedish manufacturers invented the three-point seatbelt and gave away the patent because saving lives mattered more than licensing revenue. They were designing crumple zones, side impact protection, and rollover structures long before regulators required them. Their assumption was simple: at some point, something will go wrong. This mindset didn't stop at crash safety either. Durability became non-negotiable. They chose parts to last, not to impress on a spec sheet. Engines were tuned to run reliably in heat, cold, and everything in between. Cabin design considered real conditions, such as low light, bad weather, and thick gloves on the steering wheel. These cars weren't built for perfect days. They were built for days when things go wrong. The entire product design reflected the understanding that cars operate in imperfect conditions and must remain functional when everything else fails. This mindset was reflected in the business model. Unlike mass-market producers, Swedish manufacturers didn't chase volume. They didn't focus on performance like German brands did. They occupied a middle space, offering enough luxury to fund safety innovations and enough practicality to appeal to cautious buyers. They built cars for people who viewed transportation as a survival tool, not a status symbol. This approach fostered customer loyalty based on predictability rather than excitement. Financially, this translated into conservative growth. Swedish manufacturers did not expand aggressively. They used platforms for longer periods of time. They prioritized engineering efficiency over spectacle. The result was lower revenue peaks, as well as lower operational risk. When economic stress hit, these companies were less exposed, less complex, and more flexible in adapting. And economic stress always arrives. The first oil crisis in the 1970s shattered assumptions about unlimited cheap fuel. Suddenly, performance for its own sake looked irresponsible. Consumers started asking about fuel economy. Governments imposed efficiency standards. Manufacturers built around high-displacement engines faced a structural problem. German brands adapted, but adaptation meant compromise. Smaller engines, turbocharging, weight reduction. Each change diluted the original philosophy. Swedish manufacturers faced the same crisis differently. Their cars were already designed for efficiency. They weren't built for speed, so they didn't suffer when speed became politically incorrect. Safety and durability remained relevant regardless of fuel prices. The crisis validated their philosophy instead of threatening it. Then came safety regulations. Crash testing became mandatory. Suddenly, every manufacturer had to invest in the engineering Swedish brands had been doing voluntarily for decades. German manufacturers could still outperform Swedish brands on the track, but they could no longer claim superior safety. The moat around performance narrowed. The moat around survival widened. Emissions regulations followed the same pattern. Tightening standards forced manufacturers to add complexity. Each system added cost, weight, and reduced performance. For brands built on performance, this was existential. For brands built on survival, this was just another constraint to engineer around. Electrification pushed that gap even wider. Electric cars changed what actually matters. When every electric motor delivers instant torque, peak horsepower stops being a selling point. When software caps top speed and high speeds drain battery range, chasing maximum velocity loses meaning. In an electric vehicle, the battleground shifts to battery management, software integration, and charging networks. These are systems engineering problems, not mechanical showcases. German manufacturers are struggling with this transition. Decades of knowledge about internal combustion engines don't transfer cleanly to electric architectures. The engineering culture that celebrated complexity now faces a product where simplicity is an advantage. Electric motors have fewer moving parts. Electric drivetrains don't need the ultra-precise machining that once justified premium prices. When that complexity disappears, so does the value story built around it. For Swedish manufacturers, the transition was less jarring. Their engineering culture was already conservative, already modular. They weren't optimizing individual components to perfection. They were designing systems to work together. That mindset translated cleanly into the electric era. Software-defined vehicles present a similar challenge. Modern cars are becoming computers with wheels. Value increasingly comes from software and user experience. This is alien territory for companies built around mechanical engineering excellence. German manufacturers are hiring software engineers by the thousands, trying to build capabilities that took technology companies decades to develop. Swedish manufacturers face the same challenge with less brand legacy at stake. They weren't selling ultimate performance, they were selling trustworthiness. That value proposition translates more cleanly into software. The financial implications become clear when examining capital allocation. German manufacturers invested billions in internal combustion refinement until electrification became inevitable. Much of that investment is now stranded. It generates returns for a few more years, then becomes obsolete. The cost of switching directions at high speed is measured in write-downs, plant closures, and workforce restructuring. Swedish manufacturers invested more cautiously. They developed good enough engines and focused resources on platform flexibility. When the transition arrived, they had less sunk cost to abandon. The conservative philosophy that limited upside during boom times now limits downside during disruption. This pattern repeats across automotive economics. German vehicles, with higher complexity and tighter tolerances, face more potential failure modes, more recalls, more warranty expense. Swedish vehicles, designed for worst-case scenarios with forgiving tolerances, fail less catastrophically. Supply chain exposure tells the same story. German manufacturers relied on specialized suppliers for specialized parts. When one supplier faced trouble, entire production lines could halt. Swedish manufacturers used common components with multiple sourcing options. More resilience, lower risk. Platform strategy reveals one of the clearest differences between German and Swedish automotive philosophy. German manufacturers multiplied platforms to fine-tune every vehicle segment. This created precision, but also soaring engineering costs and operational complexity. Swedish manufacturers took the opposite path. They ran fewer platforms harder, stretching the same architectures across multiple vehicles. The trade-off was less specialization, but far greater scale efficiency. Over time, that discipline became a structural advantage. Economic downturns expose how companies are truly built. Businesses with high fixed costs and rigid operations don't bend easily. They can't slow production without leaving expensive factories and tooling idle. Swedish manufacturers design for flexibility. They can dial production up or down and survive downturns with far less financial damage. Markets reward predictability. The German model produces higher peaks, but also deeper valleys. The Swedish model delivers steadier performance. Over time, consistency earns higher valuations and lower capital costs. Electrification is now testing these philosophies in real time. German manufacturers are burning cash to reinvent century-old systems. Plants are closing, labor agreements renegotiated, cultures forced to change. The companies struggling most are those that invested deepest in the old performance-driven model. Swedish manufacturers face the same transition with less drama. Their electric vehicles emphasize familiar values: safety, reliability, practicality. The technology changed, but the philosophy didn't. The shift feels evolutionary rather than revolutionary. Autonomous driving may follow the same pattern. German manufacturers treat autonomy as a performance problem: how to drive faster and more precisely. Swedish manufacturers treat it as a safety problem: how to reduce harm to occupants and pedestrians. History suggests regulators favor risk mitigation over speed. The market is already passing judgment. Chinese manufacturers are out-executing German brands in electric vehicles: faster, cheaper, with comparable quality. Performance moats don't translate well to EVs. Motors can be copied. Manufacturing heritage matters less. Software advantages come from talent and iteration speed, not legacy. Meanwhile, safety and durability remain defensible. You can't shortcut crash testing. You can't fake long-term reliability. These require institutional knowledge built over decades. This is the core lesson. Speed as a philosophy is fragile. It depends on conditions where performance premiums matter. Survival as a philosophy is anti-fragile. It grows stronger under stress. It sells trust, and trust transfers across technologies. History doesn't reward the fastest. It rewards the most adaptable. If you enjoy this kind of deep industrial analysis, subscribe.